The Arctic doesn't just freeze you, it stalks you, sinking its icy claws into your marrow with a hunger that's alive, merciless, unyielding. They warn you about the wind that roars like a predator, the darkness that devours whole days, the snow that blinds you to anything but its infinite white. But they don't tell you how it strips you bare, layer by layer, until you're nothing but the frantic thud of your own heart echoing in a silence so vast it deafens. Out there, the enemy isn't just the mission. It's the air that sears your lungs, the ice that shifts beneath your boots, the quiet that coils around you until you're screaming inside just to feel alive. I'd been forged for this. Years as a seal sharpening me into a blade. Cold. Unfeeling. A man who didn't bend for anything softer than steel. That's what I'd etched into my soul. What I'd sworn to live by. Until Joe. It started months back, in the crucible of training, where exhaustion and grit blurred the lines of who I thought I was. I'd never questioned myself. Sarah had been my anchor, her soft laugh and warm arms a refuge through the tempests of my life. She was gentle, steady, the kind of woman you build a future with, picturing gray hair and a porch swing somewhere quiet. I loved her, truly, but the relationship had stagnated, a quiet drift I couldn't ignore. It had turned to ice, frozen moments where passion should have burned, her touch rare and distant, like she'd lost interest in me altogether. I'd convinced myself her presence was still a safe harbor, but there were shadows I'd buried, moments I'd shoved down deep, pretending they didn't linger. A glance at a teammate's broad shoulders in the locker room that held too long, the electric jolt when a man's hand grazed mine, the quickening pulse I'd chalk up to adrenaline. I'd brush it off, blame the grind, too many missions, too little rest, nothing real, nothing worth facing. Then Joe walked in, and the earth tilted beneath me. They paired us for a covert op. 2 men, 1 objective, a knife edge between success and a frozen tomb. The first time I saw him, striding into the briefing room with that quiet, unshakable confidence, the air turned heavy, charged with something primal. He was all sharp lines and contained fire. Cropped dark hair framing a jaw carved from stone. Eyes like storm clouds, deep and piercing, cutting through you without trying. Every move he made was deliberate, every word precise. A man who didn't need to prove himself because he simply was. I told myself I was sizing him up. My partner, my lifeline, cataloging his strengths, his quirks. Tactical, professional. But when his gaze locked on mine, steady and piercing, it lingered a beat too long. And something stirred in me. Unfamiliar. Urgent. I stared back, breath snagging, and I couldn't shake the feeling he saw right through the armor I'd worn my whole life. Training became a slow unraveling, a thread of tension I couldn't sever. Hand-to-hand drills morphed into something more, his grip on my wrists like iron, his body pinning mine to the mat, his breath a hot murmur against my skin as he held me down. "Focus, Ben," he'd say, that half smirk tugging at his lips, a spark in his eyes that dared me to wonder if he felt it too. I'd push back, muscles straining, telling myself it was just the fight, just the challenge, but my pulse raced for reasons I couldn't name. Underwater drills were worse, watching him cut through the pool, all sleek power and grace, water clinging to his skin like it couldn't let go. I'd surface beside him, our shoulders brushing, and feel a jolt I couldn't explain. We moved as one, diving, climbing, breathing in sync, trusting each other with every heartbeat, every step. I called it camaraderie, duty, anything but what it might have been. But at night, alone, his face haunted me. Those steady hands, that low voice, and my body burned with a need I couldn't bury. Weeks bled into months, and the tension took root. We'd spar late into the night, the gym emptying out, leaving just us, grunting, sweating, bodies crashing in a rhythm that felt too close. Once, he flipped me onto my back, his weight pressing me down, his face inches from mine. "You're distracted," he said, voice rough, his breath grazing my lips. I swallowed hard, pinned beneath him, and for a moment, I didn't want to move. I muttered something about needing sleep, but his smirk said he saw through it. Another time, in the showers, I caught myself tracing the lines of his back as water streamed over him, steam curling around us like a shroud. I turned away, heart pounding, cursing the heat pooling low. It was nothing, I told myself. Fatigue. Stress. But the lie was fraying. When the mission dropped, I thought I'd buried it. We were airlifted into the Arctic wilderness. Me and Joe against the frozen abyss, tasked with infiltrating an outpost lost in snow and shadow. Get the intel, get out, leave no trace. Days blurred into silence. The crunch of our boots, and the wind's mournful wail our only companions. The isolation was a vice, tightening with every step, but Joe was my tether. He'd adjust my gear when the straps slipped, his fingers brushing my neck, lingering with a gentleness that stole my breath. Sharing a canteen, our knuckles would graze. Brief, accidental, but enough to send a spark racing through me. And those smirks. God. Those smirks. When our eyes locked over a map, holding too long, too deep. A silent exchange I couldn't unravel. I'd look away, swallowing the heat rising in me. But it was a tide I couldn't stem. Nights were a quiet hell. We'd huddle in our bivouac, the cold seeping through the canvas, our sleeping bags inches apart. I'd lie awake, listening to his steady breathing, the rustle of fabric as he shifted, every sound a subtle torment. One night, reaching for his pack, his hand brushed mine, and I froze, the contact searing through me. "Sorry," he muttered, voice low. But his fingers lingered a heartbeat too long, and when our eyes met, there was something raw in his. A question, maybe, or a truth. I stammered something incoherent, rolled over, and willed my heart to slow, but the air between us crackled with unspoken things. Another time, a storm pinned us down, the tent shuddering under the wind's rage. We sat shoulder to shoulder, maps spread between us. And when his knee pressed against mine, I didn't pull away. Neither did he. We stayed like that, silent, the heat of him seeping into me, until dawn broke the tension. The night it all broke apart. We were crossing a frozen river, the moon a thin sliver casting silver across the ice. I took the lead, my boots testing the surface, Joe a shadow at my back. The world held its breath. Then it shattered. A crack split the silence, and the ice gave way beneath me. I plunged into the black water, the cold a brutal fist slamming into my chest, stealing my air. My arms flailed, hands clawing at the jagged edge, but the current yanked me down, the darkness swallowing me whole. Panic clawed through me, my lungs burning, my body thrashing against the icy grip. I was losing, slipping, when a shadow loomed above. Joe. "Ben! Hold on!" His voice cut through the roar in my ears, sharp and desperate. I saw his silhouette drop flat, stretching out across the ice, his arms plunging into the water, his hands hooked under my armpits, fingers digging in with a strength that bordered on feral. And he hauled me up. Inch by agonizing inch. My body scraped against the ice, water streaming from me as he dragged me free, his breaths ragged with effort. I collapsed onto the snow, a trembling heap, the cold sinking teeth into my bones. "Stay with me, damn it!" Joe growled, his voice raw, dragging me toward a hollow beneath the pines. My vision blurred, lips tingling blue, but his hands never left me, steady, unyielding. He threw up the bivouac with shaking hands, one tent, one sleeping bag, the emergency kit our only lifeline. I was fading, shivers racking me, my breath a shallow rasp against the wind. "Ben, look at me," he snapped, shaking my shoulders, but my eyes fluttered heavy and distant. Hypothermia was stealing me, and Joe knew it. "We've got no time." Skin to skin now." His voice was a command, brooking no argument. He stripped me down, peeling away the soaked layers until I lay bare, my skin pale and chilled. A shivering wreck. Then his own clothes, jacket, shirt, pants, hit the ground, and he slid into the sleeping bag beside me, pulling me close. It was desperate, primal. Joe yanked the zipper up, sealing us in the tight cocoon of the sleeping bag, and pressed himself against me, chest to chest, his arms looping under my shoulders, hands splaying across my upper back, my head tucked into the crook of his neck. And he pulled my hips flush to his, aligning our bodies to share every scrap of heat. His legs tangled with mine, thighs pressed tight, and I could feel the tremor in my frame, the cold leaching from me into him. His hands moved in urgent, sweeping arcs, rubbing my shoulders, tracing the ridge of my spine, kneading the muscles of my lower back, chasing warmth into my flesh with a determination that felt like a lifeline. At first, it was just survival, a frantic bid to claw my way back from the edge. The cold had sunk so deep, numbing my fingers, my toes, my thoughts, that I barely registered anything beyond the ache in my chest and the shallow rasp of my breath. But slowly, painfully, the warmth began to seep in. It started in my core, where Joe's chest pressed against mine, a steady heat that radiated outward, thawing the ice that had gripped my ribs. My shivers lessened, the violent rattling of my bones softening to a faint tremble, and I could feel the blood stirring in my veins again, sluggish at first, then stronger. My fingers, curled against his back, began to uncurl, tingling as sensation crept back. The fog in my mind lifted, replaced by a dull awareness of the world beyond the cold. The rustle of the sleeping bag, the faint howl of the wind outside, the solid weight of Joe holding me together. Being held like that, in the grip of crisis, felt good, more than good. It was a tether, a promise that I wasn't slipping away into the dark. Each press of his hands, each shift of his body against mine, pulled me back, grounding me in the raw, visceral act of survival. But as the warmth spread, down my arms, into my legs, flushing my skin with life, I started to feel better. Truly better. And the sensation shifted. It wasn't just the relief of being held that anchored me now. It was the realization of who was holding me. The hard planes of his chest, the strength in his arms, the rough scrape of his stubble against my temple. It was a man. It was Joe. His body was pressed to mine. That awareness grew sharper, more potent as the danger faded. I was fully out of it now, the hypothermia's grip broken, my breath steadying, my pulse strong. Joe didn't let go, though. His arms stayed locked around me, his hands still resting on my back, warm and unmoving. I became acutely aware of how close we were, how his breath fanned my neck, how his heartbeat thudded against my chest. My mind reeled, a storm of shock and realization. Was this real? Just the heat, the adrenaline, survival twisting into something more? I couldn't pull away, and neither did I want to. And even if I did want to withdraw, the frozen hell around us forced me to hold on as I was still recovering. My body needed his heat, but I needed more, his heat and more. So I stayed in his embrace, my breath hitching as the pressure grew sharper, a hot contrast to my still cool skin. The sleeping bag trapped us, amplifying every touch. The slide of his skin, the faint friction where our bodies pressed close. Joe shifted, his head lifting, and his low chuckle broke the quiet. "Haha, guess we're both alive now, huh?" he said, voice rough but warm, brushing it off like it was nothing. Just a quirk of the moment, natural as breathing. His ease steadied me. Our eyes met in the dim light filtering through the tent, his storm gray gaze locking onto mine. There was no judgment, no retreat. Just a quiet challenge, a flicker of heat beneath the calm. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. Slowly, his face inched closer, breath ghosting over my lips. The first kiss was tentative, a soft press. Testing. It was my first time touching a man like this. It was thrilling, new, electric, a discovery that set me ablaze. The cold gnawed at us, sharp and unrelenting, but we fought it off with the warmth of our bodies, skin tingling with sweat and stubborn resolve. Joe dragged the second sleeping bag closer, draping it over the one we were already nestled in, crafting a snug cocoon, a lover's haven, with just enough room for air to slip through so we could breathe. Shielded from the chill, we burrowed into our little nest. A flood of realization crashed over me. How fiercely I'd craved this. How long I'd buried that hunger deep within. Since puberty, I'd known this desire, a quiet ember glowing beneath years of denial, never confessed to myself, let alone another soul. Now, its vitality overwhelmed me. I felt an intimacy so profound it tethered me to him, raw and unshakable. It was immensely meaningful, all of it. We collapsed, trembling, holding each other as the wind raged outside. Dawn dragged us back too soon, the cold snapping at my senses as I stirred awake beside Joe. We were no longer in each other's arms, the space between us a quiet void after the night's heat. As we rose, stiff and silent, I wrestled with uncertainty. Feared he'd used it as some fleeting experience, a story to tuck away. Dressing, I stole glances at him, the mission clawing back into focus, duty settling heavy. We packed in silence, the air thrumming with what we'd shared. But my mind churned. Then, as we gathered our gear to leave, Joe stepped close, his hands finding my shoulders. At first, he seemed self-assured, his grip firm, but a flicker of hesitation crossed his face. He lifted one hand away, pausing until his gaze met mine. Intense, unguarded, brimming with want. Something shifted in him. He leaned in cautiously, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that lingered, soft but sure. We pulled apart, wordless. No need for speech. In that moment I felt it. Something real. Something good binding us. His eyes found mine again as we shouldered our packs. Not teasing now, but warm, intimate. And when our shoulders brushed, I leaned into it, craving the contact. We finished the op. Intel secured, exfil seamless. But every step back to the helo, his presence anchored me. Unshakable. On the ride back, sitting across from him, our knees touched, and we let them stay. Joe caught my eye then, winking, slow and meaningful. The gesture sinking deep as the helo's hum enveloped us. His smile, small, private, a promise, told me it wasn't over. It started unraveling with Sarah long before the ice, before Joe. Back at base, I'd catch her eyes drifting, distant, hollow, like she was looking through me, like I wasn't even there. The way she'd laugh at my jokes felt rehearsed, her touch mechanical. I never saw it for what it was. On the helo ride back, her face haunted me, not with longing, but with clarity. I'd never intended to cross that line with Joe or anyone else. I'd been loyal to her, even when our relationship hung by a fraying thread. But as the rotor blades thrummed, I knew I couldn't carry on with her. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about respect, for her and for myself, a man of honor bound to face the truth. One night, tangled in sheets that smelled faintly of her perfume, I asked her point blank if she loved me. Her hesitation was a blade, sharp, cold, final. She stammered something about trying, but the lie was bare between us. I ended it the next morning, voice flat, heart numb, telling her we were done. She didn't fight it. She just nodded, like she'd been waiting for the push. She seemed relieved. I walked away, feeling lighter, unmoored, but free. Joe was there, steady as ever. After that night in the sleeping bag, the heat of him seared into me. I couldn't unsee it, the pull, the truth. Back at base, routine became a tightrope. In the briefing room, his voice cut through the hum, calm and sure, while my gaze lingered on the hard edge of his jaw, remembering the scrape of it against my skin. Passing in the hall, his fingers brushed my arm. Quick, secret. A spark that jolted me awake. His eyes caught mine, dark with the same hunger I felt, a silent promise we couldn't speak. We moved like shadows at first, not because the regs would nail us, equal rank kept us safe there, but because SEALs don't bend easy, and we didn't know how they'd take us. A glance that stuck too long in the briefing room, a hand brushing my arm during a gear check. Every touch was a spark we buried, scared of the team's hard edges cutting us down. Off base, we'd slink into a dive motel, the neon sign flickering pink and green, buzzing like the jittery heat in our veins, no one around to witness our descent. Once, in the armory, metal clanging as our shield, I pulled him close, kissing him fierce and fast, tasting salt in the dread of what they'd say. That fear was a cage, and it was starting to crack. The hiding wore thin, reckless and raw. A hand on his thigh under the mess hall table, a smirk he didn't snuff out. We pushed it, lingering in empty corners, voices low, bodies grazing when we thought it'd slide. The regs didn't care, but we did. Terrified the team would turn, that the whispers would shred what we'd built. One night, sprawled on a creaky motel bed, Joe traced the scar on my chest, voice like steel. We're not cowards. I want you, out there, no more ducking. It hit me sharp. We could have been open all along. The rules allowed it, but we'd let fear choke us, trading truth for safety when we could have stood tall. We stopped running. Next briefing, heart pounding. I caught Joe's eye, and we laid it out. Quiet, steady, no apologies. We were together, same rank, no lines crossed, just us. The room went still, air thick, and I braced for the fallout. Stares, jabs, the cold shoulder. But then Torres clapped Joe's shoulder, grinning. Took you long enough. Ramirez shrugged. Long as you don't suck face on ops, we're good. A few nodded, some smirked, and the LT just grunted. Keep it sharp, that's all I care. Relief hit like a wave. They didn't flinch, didn't push us out. We stayed SEALs, stronger for it, no more shadows. Back at the house we'd started sharing, Joe's laugh filled the air. His boots hit the floor, his body pressed to mine. Open now. Fearless. Ours. That's the story how I found the love of my life, and we are still together to this day. I can tell you this. I will not leave him for anyone or anything else, and I know he feels the same about me.